Best way to start learning Flutterflow is to dive straight in and start building apps from the get-go. And in this video, we're going to build a simple trivia game application. So if you're brand new to Flutterflow, what we're going to do today, we're going to build a movie trivia game app to go through the basics of layouts, different pages and views, connecting to a database, and setting up something very simple so we can work through the process, and we can talk about some of the functionality and some of the things that we do when we're building apps. So if you're brand new, this is a place to start. So first thing we need to do is, if you haven't done so already, start a Flutterflow account. So start for free. Now this account I'm using here is the free version. I do have the professional version, but I'm doing this on a free version. So if you're not paying for it, I've got nothing different to what you have access to. So once you've got your account, you sign in. This is your blank project dashboard. You may have one or two apps if you've been playing around with it. I've got this one I've been playing around with, but essentially you may have nothing there. So first thing we need to do is create a new app. So on the top right hand side, we go create new. Click on that, and we need to create a project. So now Flutterflow offers us some templates to get us started, but we're not going to use any of those. We are going for a blank project because the best way to learn is to start from scratch. So that's what we're going to do. So you need to give your project a name. We're going to call it Movie Trivia and create blank. And basically it'll ask us to select a theme. The default theme's fine, because we can change whatever colours we want anyway, but you can sort of have a look at these and select whichever one you want. In fact, let's go for, we'll stick with the default. That's fine. It doesn't really make much difference. And we don't want to set up Firebase because we are not going to be using Firebase in this project. And then we probably will enable web, but we'll do that at a later date, because in the first instance we'll just be using a test mode anyway. So once you've done that, click start building. So make sure you've got your name, select your colour, disengage Firebase, and click start building. And then we have basically our page where we build our elements. Now we're going to stick purely for mobile for this. Now you can, at the top, you can build for different screen sizes. You can go for desktops, you can go for tablets, and then within that, right click on the icons at the top, and it gives you different screen sizes. Likewise on the tablet and on the mobile, different screen sizes, but we're just going to stick with the default, which is the iPhone 14 Pro, and for ease of keeping it reasonably simple, we're going to just stick with mobile, so we don't have to worry about responsive layouts or anything like that. So you don't have to change anything, basically, is what I'm saying. So as it comes in is how we're going to build it. And just a bit of a look around the page. So on the right hand side, these is our properties panel, and our elements and our pages. This is where all the properties that we can amend and change for each element are. So for instance, if I click on, just click at the top, you've got something called the app bar, which I'll explain shortly, already on the page by default, and you'll see it will change, and there are properties, there are visual properties, there are some other options which again we'll get to as we go through. But then if you've not got anything selected, just the home page, it's the properties of the page. So for instance, if you clicked on primary background, and you can just change the color. I mean, that's awful, we're not going to leave that, but that's basically what that section is. And then on the left hand side, these are our different menu options, what we do when we are building our apps, some more advanced than others. But the top one that we're on, these are our page elements, and these are all our widgets that we use when we're building up our pages and our apps. So there's a huge selection there. We're going to be using a few of those in this simple trivia game. So that's those. The next one down is called the widget tree. So at the top half of it, I'll just expand that a little. That's where you get a list of the pages in your app. And also if you have any custom components, which we're not going to for this, but there's things called custom components which you can reuse in different pages, and they'll be displayed there as well. And then at the bottom, these are the widgets that we've got on our current page. So actually on our home page, we've got a column, we've got the app bar, which I mentioned before, which is the bit at the top that you get on a lot of apps, and we've got a text element within the app bar. So the indentations there tell us that the app bar, the text is in the app bar. So the indentations just like you would get in code. So that's what you get there. And the storyboard, as we go through it, it just sort of builds out how your app looks and what connects to what. Again, we'll show that again once we've got some more pages to look at. This is the Firebase connection. Now we're not going to use Firebase, so we're not going to use that option. This is something called custom data types, again, a bit beyond what we're doing today, so we won't be using that. We are going to use these. These are variables that we can use throughout the app. So we've got app state variables, and we've got something called constants. So they're a value that's constant throughout the project, obviously. And an app state we can change and give it a value and use it in different parts of the app. We are going to be using some of those, so we'll come on to those when we need to. API calls, so application programming interface, that is where we go and talk to a third party. So for instance, we're sending text messages, if we are sending emails, if we're collecting data from third parties, you can use that to do that. Again, for this, we're not going to be using APIs, but it's there. But again, bit beyond a first day on Flutterflow project. Media assets, so if we upload any images, etc. to our project, which we probably will do, this is where they go and where we call them from. Custom functions and custom actions, we shouldn't need any of these for this. We're not going to use any authentication or anything, so we shouldn't use any custom functions or custom actions. I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. Cloud functions we're not going to use because we're not using Firebase, so we're not using Google Cloud. And then we've got our color palettes and our themes, and we've got a whole range of settings which we'll get to as we need them. So that's really all there is to it in terms of the layout. So if you click back at the build at the top, it will take you back to the top page, and along the top here, that's our version history, and we'll have some snapshots, so it automatically saves as you go along. So if you make mistakes, you can just roll it back a few minutes. It's quite a handy tool. That's if you want to create comments. Certainly if you're working within a team, you'd be using that. Project suggestions, so Flutterflow will offer you some suggestions as you're going along, which you can ignore or use. It's entirely up to you. And this is where you got bugs, you'll have warnings and errors. Errors, it won't compile, you've got to do something about. Warnings, again, it's up to you. You can decide if you want to action them or not. This we won't be going into, this developer menu, and basically for the higher subscriptions you can download the code and different things, but you can view the code if you wish. But we won't be going into that. That's not part of this. That's if you want to share the project with somebody else, if we want to preview the app, and then that's if we want to test the app. So that is basically a quick look around the dashboard. So now we can go ahead and start building out our game. Okay, so let's start building this movie trivia app. So our first page, when we first opened the app, is all it's going to have on it is an image and a start button. So I think you're going to love the images. It's they're pretty funny. So everything you need for this, so there is going to be some images. We're only going to use one, but I've got a few which you can select, which obviously whichever you want, or use your own, obviously. And there is the movie trivia questions. They are in a Google Doc link down below, so you can go to Google Drive link, get that information, so you can use it in your project so you can follow along. So the first thing we need to do is remove the app bar at the top. So if you remember, the app bar comes sort of standard on the pages, so we're going to remove that. We don't want that on our opening page. So what we do, we select it, and there's two ways to delete it. You can either right click on it in the widget tree. So we had the elements up that we can use. So we go to the widget tree, which is the second one down on your menu on the left there. And then, as I said earlier, you've got the widgets you've got in your app. You can right click on the app bar and you can delete it, or you can, when you select it, just press the delete key on your keyboard and it will disappear. So either of those ways will get rid of it. Now, the fundamental elements we need when we are building layouts, we do have quite a lot we can use, but fundamentally the basic ones are column and row, and to a certain degree container, and we tend to build most things on top of those. A stack is again something else. We've got some different types of using things, but without overcomplicating it, we want to keep this dead simple. I'm trying to get this for, if this is your day one and you've never done anything like this before, I want you to be able to follow along and build something that's usable. So we're going to use basically columns and rows for the most part. So as you can see, if you select somewhere in your window there, you've already got a column within your page, and it says drag elements in the column, and it's also there in your widget tree. So what we want to do, we want to add 2 rows. So, and you'll see the add elements icon disappears because we've now added an element to the column, and drag another one. So what you do to add a row, I'll just stop that a second. To add any element, in actual fact, into your page, you just hold the left mouse button down on top of it and drag it across, and then release the left mouse button, and that will give you your element. Now, columns and rows are there to hold other elements. So for instance, we'll put a button in one of the rows and we're going to put an image in the other row, and within, for instance, a row we can have several columns. So just an example, we're not going to do this in this instance, but certainly not on this front page, but I'll just delete those so you can see the hierarchy. Basically, you've got a column, and if we drag in a row, and then within that row, and we go to the widget tree, we've got column and then the indentation to a row, and then within that row we can actually drag more columns, and they are within the row. So that's how we build up our layouts in their most basic way. So if I go to back to the widget tree again, you've got home page, column, row, column, indented, so the columns within the row, and that's how we start building up our layouts, and that's how we can put things in different locations on our pages. But in this instance, all we want is 2 rows on this page, so we drag and drop a second row in. So we've now got 2 rows on the page just by dragging and dropping across. Now, over on the properties panel on the right hand side, we've got our alignments. These are how we align our child elements within our main element. So for instance, if we have got a row and we've got items within the row, this is how we align them. So again, if I just drag a column, select the row, and then and you can see it's aligned left, and if you watch the column, we can align it right, we can align it center, and these sort of split up different if they've got more than one element within the row. It will split them up, and then this is the vertical alignment. So we can also do the same. So if we select our column, we can also do the same again, and we've got the same options. So what we want to do in this instance, we do want to use this one, so we space them evenly. So we've got 2 evenly spaced rows within our column. So let's just do that again. We've got, by default, your column is set to align the children to the top, and you can see we've got 2 rows at the top. Now what we want to do, we want to space them out evenly, so you have your column selected still and space them evenly. We click on, we'll use that one for now. We may do that one, that's a similar kind of thing. We'll use that one for now, and we've got 2 evenly spaced rows within our column. Now the next thing we want to do, we want to add a button to the bottom one. So simply click on the button icon, drag it across and drag it into the row, and then you can see it's there. So I'll just do that again. So click and hold on the button icon and hover it over the row. You can see on the left hand side where the little purple spot that it's going to land in the row, and there, and now it's already centered because I have, when I was playing around with the column locations to show you the centralization. But if you've not done that, you'll find that yours is on the left, which is perfectly normal. That's how I'd expect it to be. So you just select the row and you centralize it, and then we've got a button. Now we want to change some properties of that button, and the first thing we're going to do, so we click on the button to select it, and then you'll see the property panel on the left hand side and the right hand side is changed. And one of the first things we want to do is change the text. So you see there the option of button text. I'm going to change that to start. And that's how we're going to start our game. Let's keep that selected. So we've got the button selected, and then the other thing we can do, we can change the type of text and the text weights and sizes and stuff. So for instance, if we went extra bold or thin, but normal is fine, which you can, this is the kind of things you can, whichever you want really. And you can change the text color, but what we're going to do, we're going to change the fill color of the button to match the image we're going to use. So we'll go for a color. So if you remember at the beginning we chose a color palette, these are the default colors within that color palette. What I'm going to do is go into custom color, so on the right hand side there. So let's do that again. To change the button color, click on fill color, and you'll bring up the color palette. Those are the ones that are standard within the color palette that we chose, and then we can go custom color. So we want to go for like an orangey-ish color, so we'll do that for now. So that looks like okay, and then you've got an orange button. Now the next thing we want to do is upload an image and put an image in here. So if you remember this option here, media assets, if you remember from the beginning, this is where we upload our images to, where we can use in our project. So if we click on that, and then we'll get the option to upload. So I'm just going to show you these. So basically I got asked ChatGPT's DALL-E 3 model to create me an image to represent, just to make life quicker and simpler obviously, and I asked something to I asked it to tell me the fun and excitement of the movies with the word movie trivia on the image. So this is the first one. I mean, really, what is that? I mean, it looks like the Day of the Dead. Look, the people that OpenAI are obviously obsessed with The Last of Us. So I mean, look, that's just awful. And in the middle, it can't spell trivia. And you'll notice this is a theme. So movie trivia. So, and I actually put in parentheses, sorry, in inverted commas, in speech marks, whatever you want to call them, include the words movie trivia. And we've got movie twivia, which is, so that's, I mean, that's an awful image. So I'm not using that one. It will be available if you want to use that one. So the next one I went for was this one, and I thought, yes, perfect, that looks just like you'd expect to see on a movie trivia game when you download it from the App Store. That looks marvellous. And then you notice it's spelled trivia wrong again, but at least it kind of looks a bit like trivia. So that's what we're going to use. So because I just got fed up of asking it to spell it right, so that's what I'm going to use, which we'll come back to in a second. And then the next one I asked for, I got this one, and now we've got double M movie trivia. At least it's spelled trivia right this time, but you know, people are worried about AI taking over the world. I think it mainly learned to spell first. So then the other one I've got was, I said, just forget the text, I'll do it myself, because you can't be trusted. But that's just as bad with a load of zombies in the background, and my tech skills are not that great. So we're going to use the one that says movie trivia, 2 I's and an A. And what we do, we upload media. So click on that, and then your window will open. Click on the upload media button, your window will open, and just navigate to wherever you've stored your images, and then select the one you want. So you can welcome to use whichever images you want. Use your own, use one of these, they're all there. So that's it's entirely up to you. And then you'll get the uploading assets. When you've uploaded, you click OK, and then you'll have your movie trivia image there. So what we do now, if we go, so if you click back on the widget palette icon or the widget tree icon, we'll end up back with our page. And then, in fact, we want the build icon at the top, and then we want to drag an image across into the other row. So if we click and drag, hold, drag an image, and then it gives you a default image. Now here, as you can see, it is defaulted to the left hand side, which is great, that's what we want. And what we need to do is just select the row by clicking, you select the image there, and then you can select the row by clicking away from the image in the row somewhere. Alternatively, you can select the element you want in the widget tree on the left hand side there. But on the image, so we've got the row selected, and we want to align central again. So that click that there to align the image central, and we want to change the size because we don't want it to be a rectangle, we want it to be a square. So if you select the image, and you'll see on the right hand side we've got the image size. We're going to go 300 by 300. And then if we scroll down, it asks us for the image type. In this instance, we want to click the drop down and click on asset, and then we just select an asset from, so we've only got one asset, we've only put one in there, and there we go. So that's how we're going to start our game. That's what you're going to get when you load up the app. I'm not actually that orange colour, I'm not overly keen on that now I've seen that. What does red look like? That looks better, matches the popcorn buckets. We'll stick with that. Right, so that's our first page. It's pretty basic, but you know, this is Flutterflow day one. That's the plan, that's the thought process behind this. So what we're going to do now, we need to add a new page, because once we click start we need to go somewhere else. So if you click on the green button at the top here, this is how you add pages, components, etc. So if we just click on that, and it's going to ask us what kind of page we want to add. There's all kinds of different ones, templates that are available for you to use, but we're just going blank again. So just create a blank page, and you give it a name, and we'll call it game, because this is where we're going to play the game. There you go, game. We have got the app bar at the top, the column that's there all the time, and the text for the page title. So what we want to do is we need to navigate to this page. So on the left hand side here at the top, this is how we can navigate between our pages while we're building. So we can just select whichever page we want to work on. So if we select on home page and then select the button, we're going to do our first bit of actions. So along the top here, on the right hand side in the properties panel, you've got the properties, which is one we're on, then you've got actions, and then you've got database connections and back-end queries, which is basically database connections essentially. We've got some animations, and then we've got, if we want to add documentation and stuff, but we want to add an action. So when we click on the button, something happens. So when we click the button, we want to do something, and that is called an action. So if you, while the button's selected, click on the actions icon, and then it's going to ask if you want to add an action, open the action for editor, or conditional action. Now conditional actions we will probably need to get into at some point during this. I'm building this as I go along, so I haven't really thought about how I'm going to do it until I've done it. I'm just doing it while we're doing it. So, but we just want to add an action, just a simple action. So add an action, and it gives you all the list of things that you can do. I mean, there's literally loads of them. Some of them we're going to use, most of them we won't in this, because this is trying to keep it as simple as possible. We just want to do a navigate to. So click on that, and then it will give you the selection of pages that you've got in your app. So you're just going to navigate to game, and that's all you need to do in this instance. That's set up. So what that means is when we run the app, what will happen is we'll be able to navigate to the game. So then if you click to game, so we go back to there, and in your nav bar on the right hand side, if we click show default button, that is a back button basically, and that allows us to navigate back to the start screen. So we'll have that set up for now. So in that app bar, there was the show default button option there. Now I don't like that colour, we'll stick with our red colour, which is being the recents. So if you open up the colour palette, so with the app bar selected, open up background colour, and if you go to the custom colour palette, and then the recent ones will be at the bottom. So just select the red one we just created, and then we've got a red app bar, and you can see it's slightly floating, which again I don't really like. So again, if you select the app bar, and what you can do, the elevation, that's kind of how the app bar looks on the page in terms of its elevation. So if we just change that to 4 for instance, and you can see the shadow extending, I don't really like those things. We'll change that to 0, and it'll be flat, and that's the way we'll have it for now. This sort of thing you probably wouldn't use an app bar in real life, but again, just showing demonstrating the functionality, what we can do. So right, so what we need to do is add a way to display the questions and the options. So it's going to be multiple choice quiz. We've got a question, and then 4 options, and basically we just want to tap on the option, I think, to select which one we've got. So what we want to add some rows. So if we add 5 rows, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now what we're going to do this time, if you have your column selected and set your main axis alignment to central, so they're all in the middle, and then what we want to do then is want to put some text in each one. So if you drag the text element, so again just click and drag it, one there, one there, one there, one there, and one there. Now what you'll see is A, they're right on the edge of the screen, which is obviously no use, and B, they're all literally stacked on top of each other. So what we're going to do, we are going to just use some padding to make this look a bit better. So if you have your column selected, this is and then the right side you the padding, and this is how we create space around our elements. So if we just on the where the L is, that's the padding on the left, and what we'll see, if we put a 10 in there, you'll see we've moved 10 pixels in from the edge of the screen, and we'll do that on the right as well. And then if you go to each row, select each row individually, and then what we'll do, on this one, because this is the question, we'll go, we don't need anything left and right because we've done it on the column, but on the bottom you want to change that padding to, let's say, 30, and then on the other columns change the top and bottom padding 10, 10, and then it's next row 10, 10, next row 10, 10, and the next row 10, 10, and then there'll be our A, B, C and D basically. So the question, we're gonna import all the questions into a database. So again, I asked ChatGPT to make me 20 movie trivia questions to keep them easy. So if Luke Skywalker was in Back to the Future and the answer's completely wrong, it's not my fault. I haven't checked the answers, so they could be all over the place, but that's not really important, but just so you know. But when you start looking at it and say, has he never seen Back to the Future? Luke Skywalker was not in Back to the Future. So I haven't checked them, but anyway, but this is where we're going to put our questions and answers. So what we'll do here is you select a text item there, and we're going to change that. So change the text itself to an A, and then give it a dot and a space. And then the next one, change it to B with a dot and a space. The next one, change it to C with a dot and a space. And the next one, change it to D with a dot and a space. That'll be where we put our answers. And then you want another text object. In actual fact, I am going to change that alignment again. So on the row, what we want to do, we want to add some, because I think that's still too close to the edge, it looks a bit weird, so I'm going to add some more padding. We put another 10 padding. If you go, once you select the row, add another 10 padding left and right. Now on this one we've already got 10 top and bottom, so what we can do, we've got an option called uniform padding. So if we select that and just put 10 in the box, then we get the 10 all the way around automatically, or we can use the slider to get what we want, but we'll just go 10 all round with uniform padding, which does exactly the same thing as adding 10 and 10 on there. So again, that one, click uniform padding, use the slider this time, take it to 10, and this one we'll do it this way again, just so you can see the different ways of doing it. I think that'll look better once we've got our potential answers in there. So what we'll do now is add some more text. So where you've got A, B, C and D, drag another text element next to each of them. So we've now got a question and 4 potential answers, and what we'll need to do is import those elements to populate those from the database, which we haven't obviously connected yet, but I think we need to do that now. So we need to go to Supabase and create an account, upload our questions. The account's free, so don't worry about that, same as the Flutterflow's free. Create a database, connect the database to Flutterflow, so then we can use the variables to populate the questions. So if you go to supabase.com, there'll be an option here for signing up. Obviously I'm already signed in, so I'll go to the dashboard. There'll be an option for logging in and signing up. So create an account, it's completely free, and then I'll see you in Supabase ready to start that. Okay, so we're now in Supabase. This is where we're going to use our database for our questions. Now, if you've not got any projects, you'll have a green button in the middle that says create or start a project. So we want a new project, which is what we need to do. And then it will be, call it the project name, we're going to call it Movie Trivia. You need to give it a database password. It needs to be a strong one. You can generate a password, but then if you do that, you are going to want to put it somewhere. in case you need it again, which you probably will. So I've just saved that into a notepad file on my desktop, but once I've built this I'll remove this anyway. So, and then the region is basically where closer to your users, or close to you in this case, I guess, because there's not going to be really any users. So I'm just going to click London, but you know, wherever you live in the world, pick one of those, and then create your project, and then Supabase will think for a few minutes. And then these are the API keys. Again, these will be gone by the time this video goes up, so I don't mind you showing them. You should never share your API keys, obviously, because these are going to be deleted anyway. So setting up the project. So these are going to disappear off screen in a second, but we do need these in Supabase to connect it. But I will show you where you go and get them from once they've disappeared off the screen. The reason we're doing this, to be honest, with this, the movie trivia thing with questions, we could probably use a list within Flutterflow within a variable, but I think it's important really from day one to understand that databases are absolutely critical to building apps of any description, especially when you start getting into authentication and lost passwords and two-factor authentication, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to use this in its simplest way I can think of, and just to give you a bit of experience in reading from a database and checking whether they've got the right answer or not. So while that is setting up, let's head back to Flutterflow, because what we need to put in here, if you drag another row across and then also drag some more text into it, and then select the row, centralize it, and what we want to do then is select the text, and we want to make that nice and big. We'll change the header. This is going to be the score. So in fact, let's just change the text itself to score. No, got my chat GPT head on because I can't spell. We're going to change it to score. We are going to change that to the actual score, but just so we know what it's going to be. And then just so down here we got the font. So I want that to be nice and big. So let's make that 26. Oh, bigger than that. 40. There we go. Now I think that's all looking a bit too bunched up now. So if you again, this is just a really exercise in layouts, which is not my design, isn't my forte. But if we go back to the column and we align back center, and then everything will go back to the top, and then if you select your row with your score in and maybe put some padding at the top there of say 50, maybe a bit more than that, 70, and then to the question, if you put a nice big chunk, pad in another 100, and then that just so we'll have the score, the question, and the answers a little bit spread out, and then we can change the text color of that, and we'll make it, let's make it bold, which is how you select that, and then the text color we'll stick with our popcorn red. Okay, so our score is going to be in there, so every time the user gets the right answer, it's going to increase by 1 when they answer the questions. Okay, our movie trivia project is created. So we're not going to spend too much time in Supabase. This is really just very, very basics. So the first thing we need to do is on the left hand side, I'm not going to go over this in too much detail. We're just going to keep the basics. So basically we want to click on table editor because we need to create a table, which is where we store the movie trivia questions. Now if I drag the movie trivia questions in, this is what ChatGPT made for me. I asked it to export it in a CSV format, and the bit we're looking for at the minute is our database table columns need to match these values. So we need 6 columns in our table. One's called question, one called A, B, C, and D, and one called correct. And then that will let us import these automatically in the right place. So on our table editor, we go new table, and we'll give the table a name, and we'll call it trivia or questions, or as long as you know what you've called it. And now enable row level security. Now this is how Supabase protects your data in your table. It can get a bit complicated, and we're not having any authenticated users, so we need to make public access to the table for the purposes, but only use it in test mode anyway, so that's not too bad. But it does mean that anybody with access to your database URL can read, write and select, etc. from it. So this have to be super careful. So we are going to put one policy in there. Again, it's kind of beyond the scope of Flutterflow day one, so I don't want to go too much into this. But we are going to put one scope. I don't want to disable it because I think that's just really bad practice. So we are going to put one RLS policy in there, which is just the way Supabase secures your information and how and who's allowed access to it. We're going to allow everybody access to it, but you should not do that. You should only allow registered users access to their own things or whatever you're doing. But for today, that's not where we are. That will probably come up in. We'll probably expand on this in another session where we start building upon the movie trivia game and make it a bit more complex, and that's where that'll come into it. But what we need to do in the first instance is add some columns. So we want a column name called question, and remember it needs to match the CSV file, and then here are your column types, and they're all going to be text. You've got loads of different types. You've got integers, you've got numeric, which are sort of decimal numbers, JSON objects, then you've got unique identifiers, which is when we're talking about things that are, well, uniquely identified, like a user, that kind of thing. Then we've got dates, times, etc. But we're just interested in text for now. And then we want column A, column B, column C, column D, and correct. And that'll be type text. And then we just save those. You'll add the columns. So the ID and the time, they are basically automatically created by Supabase. In this instance, we're probably not going to use these. We may use the ID one actually. I haven't decided yet, but we may use the ID one. But the created at is just when it creates the record, and then the question. Yeah, do four different answers, and the correct answer. Okay, so if you take the trivia.csv file, drop it on your desktop somewhere, or somewhere where you know where it is. Just take it out of the Google Doc anyway, and we want to import it into our table. So you can do it here via CSV, or you can insert here via CSV, and you want to drag and drop it into there. Oh, we've got an issue found. What have we got? So 20 will be added to trivia. Here's a preview. Too many fields expected. So there's an extra field somewhere in one of the rows, but I will make sure I remove that before you do this, so you won't have that particular issue. So, but it's fine. So just import, and then you click on import data at the bottom, and then we've got our data in our table. Now, if you remember the row level security from earlier, so we need to add an RLS policy. So all we're going to do in this one, so if you just click on this, and this is again to do with access to the table. So at the moment, our Flutterflow app will not be able to access the table because we've got RLS enabled, but there's no policies. But we do have our questions and answers. So we've got the IDs. Yours will probably enable 1 to 20, not 21 to 40, because it's the second time I've done this. And then you've got when they were created and all the information we've uploaded from the CSV. But if you add an RLS policy, now what you want to do is simply just follow along and we'll go into this in another video. We want to add a new policy, and we want full customization. So we need to give the policy a name, and we'll call it temp. That way we know it's temporary and we know to delete it in future. And the allowed operation is only going to be select, because we don't need to insert anything in the table, we don't need to update it or delete it or delete anything from the table. So we do need to allow access to select, and we're going to make that access public just to make our lives a bit easier. So if you just type in true, what that does, it just allows public access to anybody with a URL to select from the table, although they can't do anything else. So if anybody tries to insert, update or delete, the action will get blocked by Supabase, but you can view rows from the table with this policy, which is all we need to do. So click review, click save policy, and that's our LS policy setup. So that is now done in Supabase. The only thing we need to do now is get our API keys to import it into Flutterflow. So at the bottom here, if you click project settings, and you'll see the option API in the middle on the menu. And these are our API keys and our project URL, and we need these in Flutterflow. So if I open up Flutterflow, so you'll probably be on this page here where we should be on the our score page. You want to go to settings and integrations at the bottom in the cog. If you remember on the menu on the left, we have the settings option, and then we want to have Supabase enabled. So click on the Supabase option and then enable Supabase, and it asks us for our API URL and our non key. So we want our API URL, which is this one. We copy this and we paste it in there, and then we want the non key, so we copy this one and we paste it in there. And then if we click on get schema, what will happen is our table schema, so our table objects, i.e. our text within our table, has not been imported. However, we have just imported the schema for the table, so we can now query the table and bring this information into our app to sort the questions and answers out. So that's Supabase enabled. We don't need to go back into Supabase again in this particular element of it, because we're keeping it simple. We should be able to do everything else directly within Flutterflow. But one more mention on API keys. Obviously I'm showing these as part of this tutorial. You don't show your API keys, you keep them secure so people can't get into and manipulate your database. In this instance, these ones I will just remove, although you can't do much with the part API key that you can send anyway, but I will be removed these. So yeah, these things you don't show them in, you don't keep them in the public domain, you keep them secure. So that's that. So we're done with Supabase. Let's carry on building our app in Flutterflow. Okay, so I'm going to build this in a way that gets us to try and experience and play with some of the different parts of Flutterflow functionality. It's probably not going to be the best way of doing it. It's probably not going to be the most efficient way of doing it, but I want to just try and make it so we can play with some of the more simple functions as much as we can. And I'm really making this a bit as I go along. I don't really know how I'm going to do it yet, but I'll figure that out as I go. But I'm going to try and keep it pretty simple. So, you know, if this is your first time building anything, hopefully you can follow along and try and remember what we're doing. So if you remember from the beginning, we talked about some of these options and we mentioned app variables. So we want to create some app state variables. Now what these are values that we can use for our app. So we can create a variable, give it a value, and then we can change that value and use it in other parts of our app, basically. So there's different types. We mentioned constants. They're a value that stays constant throughout the app. An app state variable is one that we use in different pages of our app. And then there's also, if you go onto one of your pages, there's also page state variables which only are available on that particular page. Now for this I'm going to use both. just so we're using them basically. You could do it just with page state, you could do it just with app state, but I'm going to do one app state, one page state, just so you can see what we're doing and how we set them up. So we're going to create a page state variable. So we're going to create an app state variable. So you want to sort of add app state, and let's call it score, and it will be an integer. And we don't need to, it's not a list, so it's only going to be one option within the variable. It's not like a list of things, and it doesn't need to be persisted. That means it saves the variable, and for next time you log in it's the same. So if you click on that, it tells you basically. So we're going to then just click create, and we don't need a default value. In fact, we'll put default value as 0, and then we've got our score variable. And if we go to back to our page, we want to then add a page state variable. So again, on the options along the top, the one on the right with a little folder, this is if you're got nothing, so you've got no element selected. So if you select an element like the app bar, you lose the the page state variable option. So really you want to be clicked off, have nothing selected, just the actual page, and then the page state variable will come up, and then we want to add a page state variable, and this will be question, so we know which question number we're going to use, and that will also be an integer. And initial field value wants to be 0. That's an optional value, but we will do that, I think, because of the way I'm going to do it. Anyway, right, so confirm that, and then we've got a page state. So we could have done this with page states, we could have done both app states. I'm trying not to be confusing, but I'm just trying to show you the two different types of variables we can use within a page. So for instance, the score, which is we used in our app state variable, we could also use it on the home page if we wanted to, but the variable question we couldn't use on the home page because it's a variable for the game page only. Okay, so first thing I'm looking, we've still got page type, so click on the text at the top, and we just want to change that text. We'll call it, just put quiz. For now, we can call it whatever you want, but just to change the text so it doesn't say page title. Now we want to, our score, we can now assign the variable score to the text object. So if you select the text object, we are going to write our user score to the variable we created in the app state, which is called score. So basically what we want to do, we want, rather than the word score, we want to display the actual score that we're going to write to the variable. So on the text there, see the little orange icons next to the word text? This is how we can put dynamic parameters, variables, values against our text objects, rather than just writing the actual text in the box. In this instance, we want to give it an app state variable value, and you drop down and you'll get a list of your app states. We've only got the one, click score, and we'll put the default variable value again as 0. The reason we do that is sometimes you get a null error. If something goes wrong and there's not a default variable value in that box as well, you sometimes get a bit of a null error, and sometimes it can be difficult to find, so I just make a habit of doing it just to make life easier. It's not always the cause of it, but it certainly helps not to get them. And then click confirm, and you'll see that's changed to have the word score in square brackets. That just tells us that we are using the variable score to display there, so that will display a number ultimately. So now we need to think about displaying the questions and answers. Okay, so now we're going to add the functionality to make this work. I'm going to add some more text in here in a second. Now, what I've done first, if you remember, my IDs were 21 to 40. What I've done, I've changed them back to 1 to 20, so they're the same as what you're doing, and that is because we're going to use those IDs to choose which question we're going to be giving the user. So make sure your IDs on your Supabase table are actually the 1 to 20, which they should be if you've just imported them for the first time. Right, so we want to add some more text in here which tells our user if they've got the correct answer or the wrong answer. So we want to head back to the widget palette, select that, and we want to add another row. We want to add it underneath the score there, and we'll give it some padding in a minute. And then we want some more text, and then if we select that text and we want to change that, the contents of the text box to correct, and what font can we use that's a bit more, so sorry, jumped ahead there, standard font, and we're going to change the size, which we've already done, so we'll change that to maybe 20, and we can change the type of font. So if we click the font family, we get all the different font options. We've got the theme fonts, custom fonts if you want to add them, and Google standard fonts. So I don't think there's any there that's particularly interesting. For what it is, we'll just leave it as it is. But if you want to change fonts, that's how you do it. And what we do, we will make it bold and italic. No, that looks terribly italic. Leave it as it is. And what we also want to do is add another bit of text next to it in the same row, and that wants to be the same properties. So we want bold and a font size of 20. And text there wants to say wrong. So that tell our user if got the right or wrong answer. And we'll change the colour of those two fonts, but first we'll align those centre. So select the row and align them centre. And correct one, obviously, what you can see there, they're sort of stuck together. They're going to be conditionally displayed when our user answers the question, basically. So we'll come on to that. That's some conditional display which we're going to use, but we'll come on to that shortly when we start putting the functions in. So let's change the colours to text colour, something that goes with red. Tell you what, let's go with secondary text colour for now. And then finally we'll add a bit of padding there. Right, now obviously this is not the greatest looking user interface in the world, but this is something we'll change, add some more complexity to it at a later date. This is purely just for setting it up so we can see some functions and get going. Right, so now what we're going to do is start deciding which questions we're going to show our user in the text objects. So what we need to do a database query on the back end. So what we're going to essentially be doing is querying this page is going to query the table of our questions, and we do that using a back-end query over here. So if you remember when we set Supabase up, we added the schema from our Supabase table, and then this is going to allow us to read it. So we want backend query, which is the one that looks like a stack of computers, like a server, I guess, that icon. And then we want to add query, and this is how we connect to the backend from our Flutterflow pages. And then on the drop down you want a Supabase query, and your table, there's only one, it's called trivia. Now we're going to go single row. There are other ways of doing it, but this, we're going to try and keep it the simple way. So you want single row, and our filter, so this will be the row it collects. So basically if you have a list of rows, it'd give us a list of rows, but in this instance we want to go get one row at a time. So we want the field name, which is the field in the table, so which field are we trying to match, and we want the ID, which is the question number. So we want the ID, the relation wants to be equal to, and the value will be, so if you click on the little orange icon there, this is where we get our variables, and we had a page state for the question number. So you want to click the page state drop down, click question, and click confirm. So what that means is the page will query the ID in the table that matches whichever question number we're giving it. Now if you remember, we're starting at 0, we may reset that to 1 as our standard actual fact, but we'll come to that shortly. And that's how we do it. So what will happen is now we need to assign some values to these text objects. Now the question is quite long, so what we need to do, we need to allow the text to overflow into more than one line. So what we want to do, if we, on the text box, once you've got it selected, if you click on the expansion, so these options, these are how the object will expand within its sort of parent widget, and we want it to expand to the full width of the widget. So for that we just click on that, and what's going to happen is with that, it will now, the text will now overflow. So if I just add in there you go, you can see the text will overflow based on that, whereas it doesn't if we don't expand it. Just delete that, and then the others we don't need to do that. So with the first one still selected, we now want to select query, select it by variable, or display it by variable rather. So on the orange icons again, we'll get our list of parameters we can choose from, our variables, whatever we can use to display in the text box. And we want trivia row, which is the row from the table that we're now querying, and that wants to be the question, and we need to give it a default variable. Let's call it not set, because if we don't and we get any null values, we get an error and the page won't display. So it's always best practice to put something in there just to stop any null errors that you're not expecting. And then same thing on A, we want that to be trivia row A, and not set. Tell you what, let's copy the not set text, and then trivia row B, paste that in there, trivia row C, paste the not set in there, and trivia row D, I'll paste the not set in there. Right, and then what will happen is when we run the app, when we query in question 1, our app will display the question from the first line in the table, which is which movie feature character named Harry Potter. That'll be the question, and we'll give our 4 answers. Now, and then what we're going to do, we're going to click or tap on the text or the row itself to decide if we are to submit our answer, and then we'll probably have another button just to click next. Again, it's definitely not the most efficient way of doing it, but it's just giving us a bit of an overview, as I keep saying, of all the different things we can do, and just to play around with Flutterflow a little bit. So I think we'll put that button in now. So again, you want a widget and a row. So add a row in the bottom and then give it some padding at the top of another maybe 50, just to spread it on the page a bit. And then we want to drag a button into that row, and then we want to center that within the row. And then if we select the button, the text we want to call next, and then we'll change the button color to red just so it matches the rest of the theme we're using. Okay, so what's going to happen is when we set this up, we'll have a score displayed of 0. These will not be displayed to begin with until we've submitted our answer, and we'll display a question, 4 possible answers. We'll tap on those, it will tell us right or wrong, and we move on to next and it will change the score. That's basically what's going to happen. So we can start now building the functionality. We've got this situation where we're going to display the correct question, but at the moment we're not rolling through the questions, so we need some variables. We need to change the value of the question number variable, and we need to write the value to the score and do some actions on the next button. So let's move on to that. Our page state variable question is set to 0 as a default. Now we're going to change that to 1. So when we open the page, it will display question 1. Now what will happen is when we click the next button, we are going to increase that by 1 and then refresh the database, basically. So first thing we're going to do then is do that. So if we click on the next button, then we want to add actions. So the actions options there, and if you open the action flow editor, if you remember last time we added an action in here, but if you open the action flow editor, it's a much better way of doing it. It's a much clearer UI when you're creating actions. And then you click on the add action button, and we want to untap. We can double tap or long press, but for now we're sticking to tap. And we want to do, it's going to be state management, and then update our page state, and we want to add field is the page state we've got because there's only the one. Then the update type, so we can sort of set value, reset value, or increment. So we increment the value by 1 when we click the next button, and then we want to add another action which will refresh the database. With the database request, what's going to happen is our current database request is displaying the question based on the ID in the table, which matches the value of the page state. So if we increment the page state by 1 each time we answer a question, and then refresh the database request based on the new value of the page state, we'll get the next question. And that's what we're doing here. And so we refresh database request, and then the widget with database request refresh is game, because what we've got on the page game is not very well worded, but on the page game we have got a database request, and that's what we're doing. So even though it says that we are doing the database request on a widget, we're actually doing it on the page. So that's just not very well worded by Flutterflow, but that's essentially what we're doing. And then what we want to do then, you need to add another page state and call it refresh page, and the type is a string, and the initial value call it refresh, and then confirm. What this does, and it doesn't work in every situation, but it should work in this one, when we refresh the value of this, what will happen is it will refresh the view based on the new information that the page has got. So if we go back into our next button, go back into the action editor, and then update our page state, so add an action, and you want state management, update page state, add field, and we want the refresh page one. We just want to set the value to anything, basically set value. And if you notice, because this one is a string, not an integer, we've only got set value or reset value, whereas on the integer we got the increment as well. But this one, we want to set the value and call it anything. Just call it page update or anything you like. And what happens is, this is the important bit, it rebuilds the current page. So we're updating the page state, we're incrementing it by 1, we're refreshing our database request, and then essentially we're just rebuilding the page. So what will happen is, when we click next, we'll get a new question. That's what should work. So if you close that, and then the next thing will be to add the actions on these. Now these will all be the same, it'll be a copy and paste. We'll do them in the first one, copy and paste the actions into the others, but this is where we're going to start looking at conditional actions, which we haven't done so before. So we can do it on the row, it doesn't have to be on necessarily on just the text. We can put the action on the row. So we're going to need a new page state first, because basically we need to know if it's the right or wrong answer when somebody taps on the row. So we need one that is something called a boolean, which is a true or false. So when you tap that, is it correct, yes, is it or not, and that'll add the score and display whether you're right or wrong, and we're going to put that on each of those. So if you add another page state, call it correct answer, and we want to find the one that's called a boolean, which is true or false, and it does want to be nullable, because we only want one of these displayed, the correct or the wrong displayed, when it's true or false, so we can null the value and they won't be displayed. So if we confirm that, and then the next thing we need to do is on the row, add an action, and then go to the action flow editor again, and this is where we're going to start adding conditional. So this is conditional, means if something is true, do this, and if something is false, do this, in its simplest form. And that's what we're going to do. So the boolean that we have just created with the page state variable, we're going to set the value depend on if the answer is right or wrong, and then we're going to do some actions. So in this instance, the first check will be, does our answer match the correct answer in the table? And if it does, do this, and if it doesn't, do that, and then we'll do the actions relating to the Boolean variable based on that. So add a conditional action, and on the right hand side here you want to go conditions, single condition, and then our first value, which is basically we're going to have two values, and our first value is going to be trivia row A, because that's the one that we're on, is equal to trivia row correct, because that's one of the answer, confirm. So that's going to check that if A is the same as the correct answer. If it's false, we need to add an action and state management, and it will be update our page state, and then we add the field, and this will be our correct answer, and we need to set that value to false. And then if it's true, we need to add an action, and then that again state management, update the page state for the correct answer, set that value to true, and also add an action. If you remember, our score we're keeping in an app state variable, not a page state variable, just to demonstrate the two different types of variables really. And then it will be state management again, and then it'll be update app state, and you'll get your list of app state variables, which we've only have the one, score, and then increment the score by 1, so we're adding 1 to the score. And then again on that, add another action, and it's state management again, update page state, add a field, and we want to refresh the page again. So when we, and again you can put anything in there, it doesn't really matter, just setting some text in there. It doesn't have to be refresh, it can be any bit of text you feel free to use. And then what happens is our score widget will update with the score, and then as you can see these are currently linked, which is obviously no use, so simply put something called a terminate in there, and then that splits up our true and false answers. So what we've done there is if A is correct, is the correct answer, we are going to set the variable for displaying the correct or wrong answer text to true. We're going to increment the score, and then we are going to refresh the page, and then all we need to do on the other side is set the variable that displays the correct or wrong text to false, basically, and that's all we need to do on that. Now we're going to copy and paste those to the other ones in a moment, but what we do, these now need to be conditionally visible. So what that means is, one thing to do in Flutterflow, we go back to properties, visibility conditional, you can display conditionally text based on certain sets of circumstances, and one of the most obvious ones is if something is true or false, and that's what we're going to do. So we need to toggle that on, and we want a single condition again, and then basically if our page state correct answer is equal to true, we'll display correct, and then if we go to our wrong text and we want toggle on conditional display, and we want a single condition again, and if our page state correct answer is equal to false, that will display. So our variable is set as null to start off with, and then we're going to reset it to null, and then once we change it to true or false, it should display that text, and we've refreshed the score, so that now should function. We've set the next values on there, and then what we want to add in here actually as well is, so on the next button we need to reset this variable here. So if we go open the action flow editor, let's put one in here, add action, and again state management, update page state, add field, and the correct answer we want to reset the value, which should take it back to its null form, which is what we started with. Okay, so that should give us enough to be able to do at least display a question and see what happens. So what we'll do now, we'll go into test mode and see what happens. So on Flutterflow, one of the things you can do, you don't have to publish an app to test it. You've got test mode in the corner. If you remember, we spoke about it very briefly at the beginning of the video. And what you can do there, you click on that, and then it will display, and it will display all the functionality of your app. So if you click on test mode, and it will start compiling your app, and we will. It takes a couple of minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. It's not always under 2 minutes, but once it's on, your app will display, and hopefully won't have any errors. Okay, so this is test mode started. As you can see, we've got our top quality spelt movie trivia picture and our start button. So if you click on the start button, we've got our first question, which is good. Our score was 0, which is good. And then which movie features a character named Harry Potter? We're going to put Lord of the Rings because it is the only, obviously remember we've only done it on A. We haven't done it on any of the other questions. So we need to copy and paste those across, but if we click on A, Lord of the Rings, we should get a wrong answer. There you go, wrong, which is good. And then if we click next, it should give us the next question. And we haven't recycled the score, which is good because we didn't get it, we got it wrong. So that's great, that's working. So we need to then go back into Flutterflow, copy and paste this action down to the other answers, and then we just got to set up how to finish the quiz, and then that should be us done for our very simple quiz app. So we can close down test mode, so you can end the session or just let it run out, that's fine, either or. What you can do if you're on the free version, you get 9 minutes, 12 minutes actually, but by the time it's loaded it's slightly less. So you can actually leave the session running, and if you make your changes within that, just click reload and it will reload the session with your changes. But failing that, if the session runs out, you just start a new one. So if you go back into Flutterflow, and on our row, if you open up the action flow editor, and on these 3 dots at the top we get some options, and we want to copy the action chain, which is copy the conditional actions, and that'll copy all of this. So copy conditional actions, close that, and then on the row for B, open up your action flow editor and paste actions. Now you're going to get some errors because, oh no we're not, okay, so sometimes it doesn't always recognize the database rows, but in this what we need to do is change the conditional action. So, and the first value is actually not A, it's B. So we need to change the row field that we're checking as B against the correct answer. So that's fine. And then we can close that and then do the same for C. So we open up the action flow editor, paste the actions, and then the conditional bit, we need to change the first value of the row field to C, then just confirm and confirm, and then likewise for D. And then there we go, right, and I think the others set value true, increment the score, and then refresh the page. So that's basically all we need to do on that, and then we've done that. So let's go back into test mode if you kept it open, and then we will do the instant reload. If you didn't keep it open, just reset one, and then what we'll do, we'll get a couple of correct answers and see if our score displays correctly and if the correct answer comes up. So, and then all we've got to do then is work out how we finish the quiz. So you can see we're back to our start page again, press start, and we'll start our quiz. So we know that it's Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or the Philosopher's Stone if you live in Europe and places. So click on that. There we go, correct. And let's move on. Which lead role in the movie played Forrest Gump, Tom Hanks, that's correct. And then Darth Vader appear, always in the Matrix obviously, wrong, that didn't do. And then feature the name Simba, it's the Lion King, correct. There we go, so that's working, that's nice and simple. So we can now go back and just work out how we're going to finish the quiz and display our score. Okay, so to finish this game off, we just need to do something when our players ask 20 questions. So we're going to add a new page, and what we're going to do is do something similar to the home page, but we're just going to display the score and a finish button. So if we add new page and call it a blank page, and we'll call it finish. And then we've got our standard setup. We're going to lose the app bar, we don't need it for this. And then we're going to add in 2 rows, and we want to center those in the column vertically like that, like we did before. And we're going to put a button in one and the score in the other. So for the score, we want to drag a text element in, and in actual fact we'll have another row and we'll have 2 text elements. I'll explain why in a second. And then both of those want to be centered, and the top one we just want to type in your score as the text value, and we'll change the settings in a minute. And the value of the second one wants to be our app state variable, which is our score. The default variable value will give it 1, will be 0. So then that will display our score. So that we want to be quite big. So if you change that to size 30 or even bigger maybe, there you go, 40. And we'll make that our red colour. Keep everything the same. And then your score text, we will make the weight medium and make that 18, and we'll keep it as black, or should we change it to go to grey primary text. Now then, if we go, see, and this is the different options, which none of them are any good. Obviously we don't want our elements to be spaced completely to the end, and really because we want the score and your score and the score to be together. So what we'll actually do, if we do them back to the top again, and we'll do what we did with the main page, we'll just add some padding to the top to bring it down. So if we put 100 padding on there, and then on the next row down put a small bit of padding between there, and let's put another 200 to the button, maybe make that a bit more, 150, that'll do. Okay, and then we need to drag a button in here, and again select the row, center the button, select the button, and we want to change the text on the button to finish, and we'll change the button color to red, so it's the same as all our other buttons, so our red color that we've used. And then this button needs an action on it, so if we go to that, and we'll open the action editor, and the first action we need to do is to reset the score. So state management, update app state, add field, which is our score, and then we want to clear the value. So what that'll do, that'll reset the score to 0. So when we play the game again, when another player plays the game, they start the score back from 0. And then once we've done that, we'll add another action, which is a navigate one, to our home page. So basically when we get to this page, we'll display the play score, and then when they click finish, they'll head back to the home page where we can play again. So what we need to do is navigate to this page, which is going to be a conditional action. So if we head back over via the widget tree to our game page, and on the next button we need to add some more actions. So if we open up the action editor, and what we need is some conditional actions here. So what we need to do, if we add, we need to add them, we need to get the conditional action above here basically. So what we do, if we add a conditional action to the bottom, and remember what a conditional action is, then what we need to do then is all of these need moving down. So if you click on the down arrow, they will all move to below the conditional action, so the conditional action will be on the top. And what we say, and then if you scroll in and out on your center mouse wheel, you can scroll in. So when you've got quite a big tree of actions, you can scroll in and out. So what we're going to do is set that one, and we want a single condition again, and our first value will be our page state, which is a question number. So if that is equal, well, it shouldn't be greater than, but we'll go greater than or equal to 20, because that's how many questions we've got. Now this is not the best way of doing it. We're doing it because we know we've got 20 questions. If we've got an infinite number of questions, or we've got, there are many better ways of doing this, but for the beginner this is just the simplest way of doing it. When we go and revisit this, we are going to make it more complicated, but for now it's just a case of when we get to 20 questions, we will move on to the finish page. So confirm that. So if question is equal or greater to 20, so true. So if it's false, we want to perform these actions. But if it's true, add action, we need to navigate to the finish page, and we can put a terminate there just to break those up. So basically what will happen now is when our user answers the 20 questions and they're finished, when they get to question 20, they will, in fact, I think that needs to be 21, because otherwise it will go on question 20, I think, but we can check that. And then if it's false, we'll continue the actions. So this action will continue until it becomes true, and then it will move on to the finish page. Hopefully that's the plan. So that's that. So I think we can test it again and see what happens. So go back into run mode. Okay, so we're loaded. So we want to press start with our movie trivia game. So start, and let's see if it works. I've no idea if it's going to or not. It did before, so I wonder if these changes have broken it. So I guess we'll find out. Okay, which movie? That will be Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Feature character named Harry Potter. Next, okay. Who played the lead role in the movie Forrest Gump? Well, we know that was Tom Hanks. Which movie did the character Darth Vader appear? Star Wars. Next, which Disney movie features a lion named Simba, the Lion King? Who is the protagonist in the movie Shawshank Redemption? Andy Dufresne. Nice spelling. ChatGPT could work. Which movie features a clownfish named Nemo? Well, actually, that's a bit of a trick question, because I'm fairly certain Nemo's in Finding Dory and Finding Nemo, but let's get one wrong. Wrong. Who directed the movie Inception, the world's greatest film director? Which film is about a fish who dreams of becoming a race car driver? What? Is that true? Okay, we'll go for Cars. Who is the main character in the movie The Matrix? That would be Neo. Which movie tells the story? You can say I haven't checked these questions. Well, all of them. basically, so we're going to get it wrong. We're at Chamber of Secrets. Who played the character Jack Dawson in the movie Titanic? Leo DiCaprio. Which movie features a group of toys that come to life when Inc. Monsters Inc. I like that. That's some quality work. Next. Who directed the movie The Dark Knight? World's greatest director. Oh, okay. So we've got an error there, and that's an overflow error on the pixels. So I will explain what that is in a second when we go back. But failing that, it does, everything's working, I think. But that I'll explain what it is. It's to do with what we did with this box. We need to do the same with these in case we've got longer answers. But that's Vader's, obviously. Who is the main character in the movie The Godfather? Well, it could be Vito Corleone, or is it? Yeah, it's got to be Vito Corleone. Which boy Elliot? That's E.T. obviously. Who directed Jurassic Park? Spielberg. Which movie does the character Skywalker appear? Well, we all know it's Star Wars. Who played Hermione Granger? Emma Watson. Oh, was it Emma Watson? Yes, it was Emma Watson. Which film tells the story of the clownfish searching for his son? Finding Nemo. That chat GPT seems to like Finding Nemo, so. And not okay, so we've got. So I think the answer needs to be 20, not 21, because we went to question 21 with all those not sets. So that will. Then we go finish, and we'll go back to the start. So what we need to do. So firstly, on the next. Click open that. Our value needs to be 20. In the conditional action, not 21. So I was wondering if it would be stop us at question 20 rather than ask us question 20, but obviously that's what it did. And then the overflow thing, these text. So if you remember, we had an error here, too many pixels, because the text in the D box overflowed the side of the page. So what we need to do with these is basically what we did on the question and expand those. So if the text is longer than one line, they'll expand into 2 lines. And instant reload. Okay, so I'm not going to make you watch me answer 20 questions again, all the same ones. I will do them quickly and then I'll cut to the end and make sure it works when we get to question 20. Actually, here we are on question 10. This is the one that had the overflow rather than cutting them away to the end. And as you can see, we've got rid of the error where we've sort of expanded onto the second line for the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. To be honest, if you've seen it, it's probably much better if it wasn't there at all, but there we go. Raiders of the Lost Ark. Okay, so these last couple of questions, so I'll cut it back in because I can't remember how much I've got right or wrong, so I've just been clicking. So Emma Watson and Clownfish searching for his son is Finding Nemo. So now hopefully, there we go, we've finished correctly. Your score is 16, and if we click finish, go back to the start, and then if we start again, we should have a score of 0. There we go. So that works. So that's the end of this really. We've built a functioning movie trivia app. Hopefully that's been helpful. Now I'm going to go over this again. What we're going to do, we're going to add some much more complex stuff. We're going to add users and league tables, and we're going to make the user interface look like it wasn't designed by a 5-year-old and all kinds of things. So I'm going to come back to this in a couple of weeks and make it much more complicated. So hopefully this has been a good grounding. I've done it in a way that hopefully you can see some of the different actions that you can perform with Flutterflow. We're going to use much more Supabase on the next one, and we're going to go to a bit more complex stuff. So hopefully this worked as intended, and hopefully the next one will. So as always, thank you for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please consider clicking the like and subscribe. It's a massive help to a small channel like this. So Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you next time.